Thanks, Chairwoman Lee and Ranking Member Rogers. I wanted to come here today just first and foremost to thank you both for your bipartisan support for an America that shows up around the world, an America that leads. We all, many of us in Congress, have ambitious ideas about what America should be doing around the world, supporting our allies, standing up for our values, standing down adversaries, whether Russia and Ukraine or China in the Asia Pacific. And yet not all of our colleagues recognize the importance of actually resourcing the State Department to be able to do the things that we demand that they do, which, as you all know, they do with less than 1% of the federal budget. I also wanted to thank you both for putting up with me and all of our colleagues who come at you with letters and requests, helping us move the needle on dozens of issues that are important to us around the world. And in particular, I know how much work has gone into recently bicameral negotiations on trying to elevate human rights as a factor in U.S. military aid in the Middle East and other parts of the world. I can tell you, as a former senior State Department official, the State Department frequently is proud of itself for how it uses tools that Congress imposed upon it against its will. Whether it's the Leahy Law that affects how we do military assistance and training around the world, or the Malinowski Human Rights Act, which allows for sanctions against human rights abusers. All these things were opposed by State Departments under both Democratic and Republican administrations, and they're now incredibly proud of how they work with us to actually use these tools. And it's something to keep in mind as we conduct our oversight. I'm also here to draw your attention to a letter that I led with 20 colleagues requesting a bump up to the budget for the State Department officers that oversee arms transfers around the world. Security assistance is one of the most visible and defining elements of our relationships with a lot of countries around the world, from Colombia to Niger to Egypt. The scale of our military aid often dwarfs our economic assistance, and it sometimes generates a perception that the United States is the guarantor of the regimes of those countries. Sometimes it associates us with abuses committed by their security forces. And as arms transfers overseas have boomed, the personnel support at the State Department overseeing those transfers has stagnated. By our calculations, the State Department has to sign off on the human rights risks associated with weapons export licenses every 5 minutes. One sign off every 5 minutes, and that's only with a handful of staff. So we urge your committee, myself and a number of other colleagues, to consider providing a boost to the State Department resourcing that would help to make up the difference between what they have budgeted and what we're actually asking them to do to enforce the laws that we put into place. So I hope you're able to consider that as you look to next year's bill. And then finally, I know we have had many conversations about the urgent importance of making sure America does our part to fight the COVID epidemic in countries that can't always afford to do so on their own. I think all of us approach our role as stewards of our foreign affairs with a spirit of generosity. We may be personally moved by the humanitarian elements of this challenge of helping developing countries defeat this disease, but there's also a very, very significant national interest. I talk about this all the time in my district, and I say I'd much rather beat this pandemic in Africa than have to beat it again in New Jersey. The worst thing that could happen is another variant that shuts down the American economy again. And we can either fight it for a few $1 billion around the world or a few $1 trillion in America. And I know that the members of this subcommittee agree with that, and we'll continue to work together to try to make it happen. Thank you so much. I yield back.